There was an actual set order of things sailors were trained to do the moment a ship started going down, and almost none of it looks like what you'd expect. Before anyone touched a lifeboat, before anyone even left their post, there was a sequence drilled into sailors for centuries, designed to buy time in the exact moments when panic kills faster than water does. Most of what you think you know about this comes from movies. Almost none of it is accurate. Picture a normal night on a ship. Engines humming, passengers asleep, crew moving through their usual routine. Then a specific sound cuts through everything, and within seconds, everyone on board who's trained for this moment already knows something real is happening. Most ships use a signal of 7 short blasts followed by 1 long blast, either on the ship's whistle or an internal alarm system. It's deliberately different from every other signal used on board. Not a general alert, not a fire alarm, not anything crew members might second guess for even a moment. Here's the part that sounds almost too simple to be true. The entire point of that specific pattern is to bypass thinking entirely. Crew members aren't supposed to pause and analyze what's happening. Their body is supposed to react to the pattern itself, moving toward their assigned station before their brain has even fully processed the situation. That's not an accident. It's the entire design philosophy behind the signal. In an actual emergency, the seconds spent thinking, wait, is this real? Are seconds a sinking ship doesn't give you back. Crew members are drilled on this pattern constantly, specifically so that when it happens for real, at 2 in the morning, in the freezing dark, disoriented, and half asleep, they don't need to figure out what's going on. Their training already decided that for them, which sounds like exactly what you'd want in an emergency. Move fast, follow the plan, get to the boats, except that's not actually what happens next. In fact, the very next thing sailors are trained to do is something most people would never guess. Here's what almost nobody expects. The moment the alarm sounds, the instinct is to assume the goal is to get off the ship as fast as humanly possible. That's not actually what sailors are trained to think. In fact, it's closer to the opposite. There's an old piece of maritime wisdom that gets repeated in survival training over and over, and it goes like this. You step up into the lifeboat, you don't step down into it. Meaning you don't leave the ship until the deck is already going under and the boat is essentially rising to meet you, not before. The reasoning behind this is almost uncomfortably logical once you hear it. A damaged ship, even one that's actively flooding, is still a massive steel structure with shelter, food, radios, and a known position. A life raft, by comparison, is a thin inflatable tube floating on an open, hostile ocean with almost none of those things. Abandoning the ship means giving up every single one of those advantages in exchange for something far more fragile. So the real training isn't leave immediately, it's leave only when staying is definitively worse than going. And here's the detail that actually surprises people the most. Historically, more sailors have died from abandoning ship too early than from staying on a vessel that could have remained afloat. Panic convinces people the ship is doomed the moment something goes wrong. Often it isn't. Ships are engineered with multiple layers of protection specifically for this. Watertight compartments, fire boundaries, pumps that can handle serious flooding. Most fires can be contained. Most flooding can be controlled. The moment a crew abandons ship, they give up every single one of those built-in defenses. So the actual first mental step isn't panic, and it isn't fleeing. It's a trained, almost stubborn reluctance to leave it all, which raises an obvious question. If nobody's supposed to rush toward the boats immediately, what are hundreds of people on a sinking ship actually doing with that time? The image everyone has in their head is total chaos. Hundreds of people running in every direction, screaming, shoving past each other toward whatever exit looks closest. That's the movie version. The reality is considerably more structured, even while the ship is actively taking on water. Every crew member on a ship has a specific assigned role for exactly this situation, decided long before anything ever goes wrong. Some are responsible for directing passengers, some are responsible for specific lifeboats, some are responsible for head counts. None of this gets figured out in the moment, because in the moment, there isn't time to figure anything out. The moment the alarm sounds, passengers and crew are directed towards specific locations called muster stations, predetermined gathering points positioned strategically around the ship. Passengers on cruise ships have actually been shown exactly where these are, usually within the first hours of boarding, whether they were paying attention or not. Crew members guide people toward these stations directly, checking who's arrived and who hasn't. This is the part that surprises people. It's not a free-for-all. It's closer to a head count happening in real time, in the dark, on a tilting deck, while somebody nearby is almost certainly panicking. The entire purpose of the muster station system is to convert one massive, chaotic problem, hundreds of individual people trying to survive, into a manageable series of smaller, trackable groups. Instead of pure instinct taking over, there's a structure absorbing the panic and giving it somewhere to go. It doesn't eliminate fear, people are still terrified. But fear moving through an organized system behaves very differently than fear moving through pure chaos. Getting hundreds of frightened people safely to their stations is one problem. Moving all of them through the ship at the same time without them colliding into each other is an entirely different one, and the solution to that problem is stranger than you'd expect. Picture the actual physical problem for a second. Hundreds of people moving through narrow corridors and stairwells on a ship that's tilting more with every passing minute, all trying to get somewhere at the same time. Without any kind of system, that's not organized evacuation, that's a human traffic jam. And on a sinking ship, a traffic jam costs lives. The solution is a rule so simple it sounds almost too basic to actually work, and yet it's real, and it's been standard practice for generations of sailors. Up and forward on the right side of the ship, down and aft on the left side. That's it. That's the entire rule. If you need to move upward or toward the front of the ship, you use the starboard side. If you need to move downward or toward the back, you use the port side. Every crew member is trained to move this way automatically, without thinking about it, the same way you don't think about which side of the road to drive on. The effect of this simple rule is that foot traffic naturally separates itself into two directional lanes instead of one chaotic mess. People moving in the same general direction end up flowing together instead of colliding head-on with people trying to go the opposite way. It sounds almost too small to matter, but multiply this across an entire ship. Hundreds of people, low visibility, rising water, genuine panic, and a rule this simple becomes the difference between an orderly evacuation and total gridlock in a stairwell that people are relying on to survive. Nobody outside of maritime training really knows this rule exists. It's not something that shows up in movies or shipwreck documentaries. It's just quietly baked into how ships have operated for a very long time. Getting people moving in the right direction solves one problem, but moving in the right direction doesn't matter much if they're not actually equipped to survive once they get there. At this point, people are moving through the ship in an organized flow, heading toward their stations. The next step seems almost too obvious to explain. Put on a life jacket. Everyone knows what a life jacket is. How complicated could this actually be? More complicated than most people assume, and in genuinely dangerous water, getting this step wrong can be just as deadly as skipping it entirely. On many ships, especially those operating in cold water environments, crew members are equipped with something beyond a basic life jacket, a full immersion suit. These are thick, insulated, full-body suits designed to prevent hypothermia in freezing ocean water, because in water cold enough, hypothermia can kill a person in under an hour, sometimes much faster. Putting one on correctly, quickly, under pressure, is a skill that has to be trained specifically. Zippers have to be sealed properly, hoods have to be positioned correctly. Even small gaps can let in enough cold water to defeat the entire purpose of wearing the suit in the first place. This is exactly why maritime regulations require crew members to actually practice this. Not just own the equipment, not just know it exists somewhere in a locker, but physically put it on repeatedly until doing it correctly under stress becomes close to automatic. Passengers get a simplified version of this same idea. Life jacket demonstrations happen specifically because a life jacket worn incorrectly doesn't function the way it's supposed to. It can ride up, it can fail to keep someone's head above water, it can genuinely do less than nothing in a real emergency. So the equipment that's supposed to save your life only actually does that if you know exactly how to use it, under conditions that make doing anything correctly significantly harder than it sounds. Once people are moving correctly and equipped correctly, there's only one thing left standing between them and the open ocean: getting an actual lifeboat into the water, and that process is far less uniform than most people assume. Here's something that surprises a lot of people. Not every lifeboat works the same way. Depending on the type of ship, the boats themselves, and how they actually get into the water can look almost nothing alike. The version most people picture is the classic one. A lifeboat hanging from mechanical arms called davits, swung out over the side of the ship, then lowered down slowly using cables, while passengers board it either on deck or partway down. It's controlled, relatively gradual, and it's the image most disaster movies use. But there's a completely different system used on many cargo ships and tankers, and it looks almost nothing like that. Free-fall lifeboats sit on a steep angled ramp at the back of the ship. When it's time to launch, the crew straps in, and the boat is released to slide down the ramp and plunge directly into the ocean below. It's violent, it's fast, and it looks more like something out of an action movie than a rescue procedure. It's also considered extremely reliable, precisely because it doesn't depend on cables or machinery working perfectly under stress. Then there are life rafts, which aren't lowered at all. They're thrown over the side of the ship, still packed inside a hard canister, and they inflate automatically once they hit the water. If the ship goes down before anyone even has time to throw them, there's a mechanism called a hydrostatic release unit that automatically frees the raft as the ship sinks past a certain depth, letting it float free and inflate completely on its own with no human input required at all. Throughout all of this, there's one detail that stays consistent no matter which system is being used. The captain is always the last person to leave. Every launch requires final approval from the person in command, and that command doesn't officially end until every other person on that ship is already accounted for. Getting people into a boat and into the water sounds like the hard part is finally over. It isn't, because the entire process is happening against a clock that's far less forgiving than most people realize. Once the order to abandon ship is actually given, there's no walking it back. Every single person on board has to transition from the relative safety of a steel hull to open water survival craft within minutes, and international maritime law is extremely specific about exactly how many minutes that's allowed to take. Under international shipping regulations, cargo vessels are required to be able to launch every single one of their survival craft within 3 minutes of the order being given. Passenger ships, which typically carry far more people and far more lifeboats, are given a slightly larger window of 10 minutes, 3 minutes, 10 minutes. Read those numbers again and actually picture what they mean. Every lifeboat, every life raft, every single person on that vessel moved from the ship into the water inside a window of time shorter than it takes to watch this section of the video. These aren't rough estimates or aspirational goals written by someone who wanted evacuations to feel fast. They're hard engineering requirements. Every davit, every release mechanism, every layout of every muster station on every ship is specifically designed and tested against these exact numbers. If a ship's evacuation system can't meet that timing, it doesn't pass inspection, and it isn't allowed to sail. This is also why the earlier steps matter so much. The traffic rule, the assigned roles, the drilled reactions to the alarm, none of that exists by accident. It all exists because there is a hard countdown running the second that order is given, and there's no version of a real emergency where confusion is an acceptable use of that time. So by the time people are actually loaded into their boats, the clock hasn't stopped. It's still running, because getting into the water safely isn't actually the same thing as being safe. You'd think the moment a lifeboat hits the water, the danger is basically over. Everyone's out of the ship, everyone's floating, crisis handled. That assumption is wrong, and it's wrong in a way that's actually killed people who survived every step up to this exact point. A large ship sinking beneath the surface doesn't just quietly disappear, it displaces an enormous amount of water as it goes down, and that movement creates powerful suction in the water immediately around it. A small lifeboat sitting too close to a sinking vessel can genuinely get pulled downward along with it, dragged under by the same forces, taking the ship itself to the bottom. This is exactly why the very first instruction the moment a boat is safely in the water isn't to relax. It's to move, row, paddle, use whatever engine the boat has, and put real distance between the boat and the ship as fast as possible. It sounds almost cruel in the moment. People just spent the most terrifying minutes of their lives getting off a sinking ship, and the very next order is essentially, don't stop, don't look back, keep moving. But the training exists for exactly this reason. Staying nearby out of instinct, curiosity, or shock is one of the last remaining ways to die in an evacuation that otherwise went completely correctly. Once a boat has actually cleared that danger zone, the physical threat of the ship itself is finally over. What replaces it is a different kind of danger entirely, one that isn't sudden or violent, but stretches out over hours, sometimes days, and tests something completely different than everything that came before it. Getting into a lifeboat and away from a sinking ship feels like the end of the story. It isn't. For everyone in that boat, the actual survival situation is only just beginning, and it's rarely the dramatic, fast-moving crisis people imagine. It's slower, quieter, and in some ways, harder. One of the first problems has nothing to do with the ocean at all. It's the boat itself. Small survival craft rock constantly in open water, and seasickness sets in fast. Even among people who've spent years at sea, it sounds minor compared to everything that just happened, but it isn't. Constant vomiting leads to dangerous dehydration, and dehydration destroys both the physical strength and the mental will needed to survive the hours or days that might still be ahead. Survival training at this stage isn't about heroics, it's about discipline. Rationing water, managing body heat, keeping people calm enough to think clearly instead of panicking in a confined space with strangers. Every one of these things is deliberately unglamorous, and every one of them is what actually determines who makes it and who doesn't. Modern lifeboats and life rafts carry emergency beacons that automatically transmit a distress signal and GPS location to search and rescue satellites the moment they're activated, sometimes triggering automatically the instant they hit open water. Survival at this point becomes less about doing something impressive and more about staying alive long enough for that signal to actually be found. And that leads to the one idea that ties this entire process together, from the very first alarm to this exact moment of waiting. In a real emergency, people don't rise to the occasion. They fall back on whatever they've trained for. The alarm pattern, the reluctance to leave too early, the muster stations, the traffic rule, the immersion suits, the launch procedures, the 3-minute countdown, moving away from the ship, even how to survive the waiting itself. None of it is instinct. All of it is trained, drilled, and repeated until it becomes the thing your body does automatically when your mind doesn't have time to think. That's the actual answer to the question this video started with. Not panic, not chaos. A sequence built over centuries of disasters, designed to work exactly when it's needed most. If you want more of this, the real training and procedures behind the moment's history usually just calls chaos subscribe. There's always a system behind it that nobody talks about.